Gerard and Shirley Foreham to introduce themselves to us and to begin the presentations on the mission field and the countryside.
Oh, so good afternoon, everybody. We are Gerard and Shirley Foreham. We've been living in our present property in the countryside for less than a year, and the main thing we've done in terms of evangelism has been great controversy distribution. I presume we're going to get some photographs of this. we've just essentially, you can do a lot of the type of evangelism in the countryside that you can do in the town, city, but it tends to be smaller scale. So a lot of what we're doing, we're just doing as a family. Sometimes other church members do come and join us, but a lot of the time we're doing this as a family. And we've essentially, as you'll see in the photographs as they come up, the Great Controversy distribution, we've got a loudspeaker which plays a recording telling what the Great Controversy book is about. We've got a banner which advertises the book. We put books and other books on the tables. We don't just do the Great Controversy, we do reading, insecticides, Diary of Ages, other books for giving and help the general public, and we go out there and we distribute books. So we set ourselves up. It does generally require a bit more travelling, so I guess you have to be organised when you're in the town, in the countryside when you're in the town. So we do have a Aberystwyth, which is where our local church is. We do that town several times a year, and we also go to other places. We go to Swansea, Cardiff, Newport, Carmarthen, Haverford West. We've done some of the smaller places as well, like Newquay, and so we've tried to sort of cover various places. So we're essentially doing what Sister White says, and we're living in the countryside, but we're working in the cities or the towns by doing evangelism. And essentially, yeah, from an outpost. So if you want to put the next picture up. So this is so we've just actually been part of an outreach in Birmingham. As you probably know, they just had the Commonwealth Games there for 12 days, and this is our son Timothy, and we were just part of the team there. Well, there were several teams distributing books during the Commonwealth Games. We managed, we think, to give out something in the region of 7,000 books during the time we were there. Their great controversies and other things. And yes, we'll show the next picture. What you're going to see on these pictures is primarily the team that came up the first Sabbath from Salisbury Church. They came to help us, and so this is mainly them. So you can see the banners, and also Jay, who's on the picture there. He was Sicilian as well. So there's lots of ways you can do this. There's pictures now of the work that we do there. We've actually just bought ourselves a new van to do this a bit more efficiently. The van we've now got is what they call a crew van, so it's got 7 seats in it, plus it's got space at the back of the van for putting all your books and your trolleys and your tables and your banners and your speakers and all the equipment that you need to do this. So yeah, we're out in Birmingham for now you get a different mix of people in a big city like Birmingham. In Birmingham you've got quite an ethnic mix, and there's a lot of Muslims there, Africans and Polish, Romanians, people from all over the place really. And because it was the Commonwealth Games, you were getting people from all the Commonwealth countries as well that coming through, we're able to give books to. Whereas when you're here in Wales doing evangelism, it's mostly Welsh people and English people, really. You get a few others, but it's mainly just Welsh and English. So there's not such a big ethnic mix here. Um, and you know, when we were in Birmingham, you were getting Muslims, you were getting some Christians, you were getting probably quite a lot of atheists, um, and you know, again, a different mix of people with different beliefs. Here in Wales, you do get some Christians, but you get a lot of New Age people. A lot of New Age people moved out to Wales, so you've got them as well. I guess it's really Timothy all the time here because on this thing, there's a couple of pictures. And then so there's a number of things you can do. So that's one of the main things we've done is the great controls distribution, and that works quite well really. Anywhere, you obviously this sort of aware of your ethnic mix. So when we were in Birmingham, we had books in other languages. We had great controls in Arabic, Persian, Turkish, Romanian, Polish, Spanish. I think that's what we had. And people were quite pleased to get the books in their own languages. Whereas here, you don't need that so much. I mean, it would be good if we had more books in Welsh. Yeah, you get a few Polish and Romanians here, but not so many. So it's so you've got to kind of cater to the people you've got, the ethnic mix you've got, but it's here it's not such a big mix of people. You know, you will find that people will come and talk to you and ask you questions. I mean, in Birmingham, we had one Muslim guy who was very interested and asked lots of questions about the Bible, and we ended up giving him a Bible and a great controversy, and we tried our best to answer his question. Anyway, you can get people come and ask you questions. I think with what is happening in the world now, we've had the COVID, now we've got the Ukraine, people are really more genuinely looking for answers. They're thinking what is going on in the world, they're looking for something. And so you do get a lot of people come and talk to you about what's going on, and you can then explain a bit about Bible prophecy, Daniel. I mean, I've spent time explaining Daniel 7 and 8 and obviously Revelation 13 and that with people. And so you do get quite a bit of opportunity to talk to people. So that's one of the things, and probably the main thing we've done is the book distribution. Now, of course, we've had COVID since we've been here in lockdown, so we weren't able to do anything when the lockdowns were really strict. But once they opened up a bit, we started leafleting. We did a lot of leafleting, and again, obviously, you can put lots of things out. We've put a lot of advertising for great, obviously, out, but there's all sorts of things you could put out, Discovery Centre cards, or whatever you want to put out. So that's another thing you can do. Another thing we've been doing here in Wales is that, and again, this is true for anywhere. A lot of places now have what they call stand in the park groups. Now these are people who are quite aware of what's going on. They realise about COVID. They realise about, basically they realise that human order is being brought in. And so they're quite aware of what's going on. And these groups are there to support each other and to try and talk to other people and tell them what's going on and so on, make other people aware of how things are going. But they are quite a fertile soil to witness to people because, again, they're people who are looking for answers. So they have a stand in the park group in our newest little town, which is only a small town, about 2,000 population. But they have a group there that meets every Sunday morning, and they all do this. Stand in the park group all week between 10 and 11 on a Sunday morning. So wherever you are, whether you're in the countryside or still in the city, this is a good place to witness because the people are looking for answers. I mean, I've pretty much given everybody in our group a great controversy and other things as well. And people, and I sat there with them and given them Bible studies on, again, Daniel and Revelation and so forth, just trying to explain to them what is happening, I mean, we meet in the park for an hour, then we usually go to a cafe afterwards. And so for us sat in the cafe, explaining the Bible to people. So, they've got opportunities. And not only that, but ones who were more interested, we actually had a Bible study group going for a little while. Sort of last autumn, I guess it was. It kind of stopped in the winter because the people were, quite a few of them were elderly, and they decided that they didn't want to come in the really dark nights of the winter. But we've done that, so we've done Bible studies with people. You can do health expos in the countryside here as a type of evangelism. And you probably won't have enough people in your actual church. I mean, at Aberystwyth, we're only a small church, so we're actually getting some people from Carmarthen to come and help us with the health expo, and we've helped them when they've done one here. So you probably need to pull people in from other churches, because like in the cities, the churches are usually a lot bigger, and you've got enough people in the one church to do something like that, whereas we haven't. But so at the moment we're planning on doing a health expo. We're trying to find a venue. So that's something that we are planning to do. Another thing that you could do is things like cookery demonstrations and health talks. I mean, one of the some of the church members that we did have here, they've moved away now, but at one point they were doing some health talks in the local health food shop. In Lampeter, they have a cafe upstairs, and sort of in the afternoon, I think it was on a Sunday afternoon when it was quieter in the cafe, they did several times. They did some health talks there, and people came along. So there's a lot of opportunities that you could be doing in terms of evangelism here in the countryside. Yeah, so. I guess if we get to the pictures of the polytunnel, Gerard can talk a bit more. One of the things that we thought about doing as well, though our property is still renovating it, but when we've got it renovated, we thought that you could invite people to come and stay with you, to just to be in a calm environment, because obviously in the cities where people live, it's very stressful. So just to come somewhere where they can, de-stress, get the stress levels down, and all those kind of things. So I'll pass over to Gerard now. You want to talk a bit more about how you can use the growing vegetables and things that just help people. So it's an opening wedge, all these kind of things.
I'm just going to read a quote from Country Living. Again and again, the Lord has instructed that our people are to take their families away from the cities into the country, where they can raise their own provisions, for in the future the problem of buying and selling will be a very serious one. So, in obedience to that admonition, we've been starting to raise our own provisions. Now, for years I've been growing vegetables and fruits outside, but this year our big project has been to put up a polytunnel, and we're very fortunate that there's other Adventist families in the area who have also put up polytunnels, and they came to help us. So we managed to get our polytunnel up on the 14th of June this summer. And which is halfway through the season, so we haven't filled it up by a long way, but we've made a start. And one thing that amazed me was that things grow so much faster in a polytunnel than they do outside. And the other thing was that the seeds I planted, virtually all of them came up, whereas when you plant outside, only a much smaller proportion came up. So we've got big pumpkins. Other things we've cropped is kale, radishes, courgettes, salad leaves, and we've got quite a few other things coming. Right, and the other big project I've been doing this summer is keeping bees for their honey. It's the first season that I've done it. Anyone that's thinking about it, it's a very fascinating hobby, and I'm finding it quite therapeutic. So yeah,
It's also a big learning thing.
yeah, it's a lot to learn.
Not a lot of work, not
Yeah.
But it is very fascinating.
And then again, with all these things, you know, in the countryside, you can use them as an entry wedge. You know,
Yeah.
you can share this with other Adventists. You can also share it with people who aren't Adventists, because you know we're not the only ones who are kind of aware that things are going on, and that the new order is coming in. There's many people who are wanting to learn how to grow their own food. And so this can be, if you're in the countryside, this can be and growing stuff. This can be an entry wedge because you can obviously get friendly with people by showing them how to grow stuff, how to keep weeds, whatever. And it's a way of just helping people and building up a friendship, and then being able to share with them why you're doing it. Because obviously we're doing it because we know that Jesus is going back soon, whereas they may be doing it for different reasons. But it's all witnessing opportunities to be able to, you know, to share it. So there's lots of things you can do in the countryside in terms of evangelism, you know. And we're fortunate in Aberystwyth that the church members there, most of them are kind of thinking like we do, and therefore, you know, some are more along the pathway than others, but a lot of them have moved to the countryside because they feel it's going to be better for their children and so forth, and so it's, you know, the people have got that sort of mindset, so that they, you know, they're thinking that way, and so we kind of work together fairly well at the church.
Yeah.
So we've got that opportunity to work together and encourage each other.
I was just going to add that there's quite a percentage, I don't know what percentage is, of the population in general who are concerned about the threats to our freedoms that are occurring. And you know, we know there's a time coming when we won't be able to buy and sell, and that means you're going to have to grow your own food. So there's quite a lot of people who are interested in that can be used for evangelism. Do you want to add anything, Tim?
find something to. I'm Timothy, Gerard and Shirley's son. Not sure I've been on here before as such, but another thing I was just going to mention is obviously in terms of the time that we believe is going to take place in the future when we can't buy and sell and so forth, or even certainly leading up to that time as well. If we're in the countryside and we're able to be a bit more self-sufficient in terms of our you know, our food and things like that, and not be dependent on the system, that will give us more freedom to be able to do evangelism or and so forth, because you know, if we're stuck in a situation where we're, you know, almost being forced to compromise our faith, or in a very, very difficult situation, you know, financially, or even not sure, you know, even not sure how we're going to feed ourselves if we don't follow the you know, mark of the beast ultimately, then it's going to be, you know, it's going to hamper any evangelism we might be doing, or going to make it more difficult. Obviously, God's not limited in you know, for miracles and things like that, but also we've been given these directions to live in the countryside in order for our benefit, to protect us from what's going to happen in the future and so forth. So you know, if we follow that, that will God will bless us, and God will enable us to be able to work with Him and share that with others. And also, you know, if we've got property, you know, it all depends on the size of the property things we've got, but if we've got properties in the countryside with a bit of extra room and so forth, there could be many people in the future who need to get out of the cities, people who from not having this before, who just accepted the message at the last minute, perhaps, and they may need somewhere to kind of be to or whatever. So I think in the future we may maybe call upon to open our doors to people like that. So that is obviously a very much related to evangelism and so forth. So yeah, I think there's many different reasons for country living related to evangelism.
Any questions or?
What are we going to do the questions?
Thanks very much for sharing the approach that you're taking since you've moved to the country. Some of the things I gather that you've probably been actively doing before you actually moved out to where you're currently based. So you kind of come with a wealth of experience in certain areas and venturing into new endeavors in others.
We were giving out great controversies when we were living in town for quite a few years.
Well, if you've finished sharing your experience thus far in the mission field and the countryside, then I'll hand over to Winston and Jacquie Brown for them to share their experience with us. And then at the end of their presentations, we can collectively take some questions from both sides of the presentation. So I hope that makes sense. And I'll hand over now to Jacquie and Winston to introduce themselves to us.
Thank you, Brother Trevor. Hello, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Brown.
I am Winston.
And we are grateful to be here to share a little bit about our mission, or the mission that God has given us, living in the country, but working within and without the country from our home, which is kind of confusing. But some of you have heard how, we were led by God really to do missionary work. Initially, it's about mission. So living in the city of Manchester, where we were married and lived for 8 years, we then started on a journey in terms of missionary. And it came about that after the particular appointment that we were doing as missionaries, I was expecting our last child. So it kind of put a pause on any, we were thinking about, how the Lord is going to send us to Guyana, He's going to send us here, He's going to send us there. But because I was expecting, we thought, okay, we need to look for somewhere closer to home and wait for me to have Levi. And maybe a couple of years later, continue on our missionary journey.
All right, so our missionary journey didn't begin with us setting out to do missionary work. It was more, we were the mission field, if you like, our hearts and minds, in terms of where we were coming from. I was born Seventh-day Adventist, so I heard, now and again about country living and that concept. Jacquie, you were coming from a totally different background.
Catholic
so
background.
It wasn't until, as Jacquie said, we were living in Manchester that God blessed us with many messages. People would visit missionaries, full-time missionaries would visit the church. This was Manchester South Church at the time, and seeds were being sown, even unknown to us at that stage. And then we entered full-time, I think as Shirley and Gerard, Shirley mentioned, we were doing certain aspects of missionary work even before we transitioned into the country. So God took that, He used that, and he watered that seed that was planted. And so when we were in a position now, as ordained by God, mentally, physically, and spiritually, to take that leap, because it was a leap initially.
Well, most people thought we were
full-time employment, mortgage, etc., etc. That leap to enter into the mission field full-time, and God provided that transitionary period as well for us.
It was daunting. I don't think we realized the mission the extent of the mission till we got to the country. Again, the country wasn't us really sitting down and planning and all of that. It was the Lord leading and we following. So after that pause in our missionary endeavors to see, okay, where do we pause until we're ready to move on? We was like, okay, let's start with Wales. Let's look around Wales and find somewhere. Long story short, God led us to Scotland. And we thought we were just going to pause for a couple of years. But this is where we actually discovered that we were a mission field, that God needed to reach us and show us so much about ourselves that was so unlike him. And yet we were reaching out.
So the two worked in tandem. Not only was God calling us to do full-time missionary work, but he was also working upon our hearts, as he does all the time with all of his people who he calls, even his disciples. So we see the same process taking place.
Yeah, and everyone is called. And I think that's why God for so long has been trying to call his people out, because there's a journey, there's a whole journey that needs to be take place. And learning to trust God and being sufficient in him, that's from the country, from that kind of, not that you can't do that anywhere else, but I think it becomes more poignant when he gets you in a quiet place and you learn so much more around you. So once we got here, the mission initially was us.
I mean, we did have a plan. We had an idea of how we were going to live out here in the country and how we were going to sustain ourselves. But I think what you're saying, Jacquie, is that we quickly realized that we had to be flexible in terms of God's plan and him introducing his plan to us as well. So the idea was to work from home, doing what we did when in full-time employment. But as God brought, again, just through inspiration, providences, as we adapted more to living the health message, people would come and visit with us in the country, and just by virtue of them being with us, they would eat what we ate. They would, just live the lifestyle that we were living. And, the visits were brief, but many people would testify at the end of their visit that, certain ailments that they came with that we, unknown to us, were being relieved, so that also planted a seed in our minds in terms of the benefits of simply following God's health plan as well.
I think that's where the mission that we currently now embrace, that's where it really took off, in that as we were experiencing these health benefits, and others were also doing the same, we started to look more into health, to read the Ministry of Healing, to read counsels on health and foods, counsels on diet, and then we discovered medical missionary work. And it's like, what's that? And we discovered that we had been doing evangelism without the right arm. So it was a bit of a shock, because who knew about this? So that was a blessing. But that's the avenue that God took to say, okay, you're going to be a missionary in your own backyard. All these grandiose ideas that we had, or that I had, of going here, there, everywhere.
That's the idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even when in our churches we have the mission story read, it's usually the mission is taking place somewhere around the world, but what happens locally?
Because there's a mission field right here.
That's right.
Yeah, a huge mission field right here, and it was just a blessing. But it didn't. We thought, well, how's that going to be possible? But actually, as we just started to live what God's instruction was showing us, and then others were blessed, and then there were requests for training. So it's like, well, can you teach us what you've been doing? And it's like, but we really haven't been doing anything. So it started again, not so much initially with us going out, although you were doing door to door.
We were always very active
co-portering.
and encouraging other church members as well to be active. And it's funny because it always seems to start with the literature evangelism. So important.
Yeah, Sister Shirley
as a work.
is an avid literature evangelist. We met a gentleman out here, Freddie, who the first time we met him spoke about Sister Shirley. It's like, but how? How did you know Sister Shirley? She's all the way down there. So, it reaches far and wide. But yeah, so we started training. So individuals would come from different cities, different churches to train and then go back and share with churches. Then, so the mission really has been quite widespread. It didn't start, I suppose it's quite, like I said, widespread in that we started from home, reaching out to others. And then, we started to share what we were living. Then we started to speak in churches.
Yeah, so I received, if you like, formal training how to do the medical missionary work in America, whereby we also were taught how to set up, a home sanitarium, and also given materials to use to then be able to train others as well. So this was very important. So I came back from my training and taught my wife Jacquie, and God opened up doors from there. Our very first appointment came soon after with regards to a health guest, which was a blessing. And then from there, again, God just continued to open up doors just through word of mouth.
So I guess the mission in the country began in our home, and then panned out. So we would still go to the towns and cities and share books and give out tracts and so on. But our mission really has been more focused on reaching those who are already in, but who are still in mission field, or who are feeling very lost within. So that's been, it seems to have just come about that way. I'm just going to share a few slides.
Yeah, we're just going to continue talking. Thank you, Brother Trevor. If you could, I don't know if it's
can
possible.
We share our slides,
please? To give us.
So.
Let me work on that in the background. Hold on. Keep on rolling, and I'll work on that.
So we've been able to reach individuals through word of mouth who are not, Seventh-day Adventists, but who have heard of, who just want to be well. And that has been amazing. Individuals from all over the world in every spectrum coming over. And I mean, one lady sent me a message yesterday. This lady used to be a Christian, but she no longer practices Christianity. She was actually on the brink of becoming a Muslim when she came, and she was transformed in her time. And yesterday she sent me a message and she said, "Oh, by the way, I'm reading that book you gave me when I came, and that book was The Ministry of Healing." She says it's brilliant. It makes so much sense. And that's how I begin my day every morning. That was just amazing. Many people say, why do you use that book for even non-Christians or people who are not Seventh-day Adventists? We've found that most people say exactly the same thing. They said it makes so much sense, So God is reaching people using these wonderful books that we've been given to learn from and then to share with others. So the mission is also a family. It's about Winston and I, but it involves our children as well, and involves everybody else that comes into our home will become part of our family. And then we've had the opportunity to share by training others to do what we're doing wherever they are. many people have just taken the message and ran with it, which has been a wonderful blessing. In that, you have the Victorious in Philippines doing a wonderful work out there, and working in conjunction with the church, as is meant to be. And then you have the Nobelas in South Africa, again reaching out, and doing a work there in different aspects of medical missionary work. And family life, medical missionary work is all encompassing. It involves true education, true health, and just God showing us, His plan for our lives, and then empowering us to take it to others. So we go to the towns and the cities and we sing. Oftentimes we also, hand out tracts and hand out books. And when we have individuals come, we encourage them to come with us to do different, depending on what the situation is, because we currently also have a youth, segment, so that we can do more, let's say, door to door or evangelisms in the towns and cities close by. So besides speaking in different places, we obviously, the main focus really of our mission is within the home and without in medical missionary work in its various aspects. Here's some slides, and involving everyone, the whole family, and also having met individuals from all over the world and from every background. Brother Gerard was showing us the garden. The garden is a wonderful, again, a wonderful thing to be able to put your hand to, and it yields such blessings in terms of lessons, as well as when you're able to reap the first fruits. The mission in the country as well, I think that God has for us is to be, to find our trust in Him, to find, for us to lean on Him, so that, when we are without electricity for whatever reason, we don't panic and we look for solutions rather than focusing on the problem, and also find ways to be able to still live, trusting God. And this quote, is powerful. God's presence would be more real to them. Many would learn the lesson of dependence upon Him. Through nature, they would hear His voice speaking to their hearts of His peace and love, and mind and soul and body would respond to the healing, life-giving power. And so we've really experienced this on so many levels, whether it's lights being cut off for some length of time, not being able to cook normally, or it's water running out because of a drought and having to fetch water from the stream or the river, and having to wash your clothes by hand. These are all lessons that we're learning. Yeah.
Amen.
And the mission also is not just physical, now it's virtual, especially since COVID. We thought that COVID would actually put a bit of a halt to our mission, but actually we were so busy because it took to being online in so many aspects.
So God found a way to continue, the mission work, even in the lockdown
time of crisis
period.
And so whether we're physically in the cities, this is Dumfries, we just did a flash mob where we visited the different villages and towns, and then we ended up in the Dumfries, which is the nearest city, and just singing. We just burst into song, and people were just like, who are these people? And we gave our books and tracts, and it's such a blessing. We met a lovely woman called Mary, who we're still in touch with today. And now our children are also, teaching online, just simple health principles and remedies for other children and for other people to be blessed by. And like I said, individuals from all over the world and from different backgrounds and religious perspectives are welcome into our home. And from here, some people get baptized. From here, some people have Bible studies. From here, some people wanted more information on some of the things that they learned. Again, we're quite busy as well. Since once the lockdown lifted, we were able to, we were called to different groups to minister there. Here, this was in Cheshire, one of the churches down there a few months back. And again, various places. This was more recent. This was last week. We were invited to a Filipino camp meeting for the alumni of Central Philippine Adventist College. And it was a wonderful blessing, meeting other brothers and sisters and sharing the gospel of health with them. So the mission in the country or from the countryside is very vibrant. And because the benefit of modern technology, so we drop out now and again, but we were able to connect with people all over the place, and whether physically or remotely, there is a mission field everywhere. This quote says, God will work wonders for us if we will in faith cooperate with him. Let us then pursue a sensible course that our efforts may be blessed of heaven.
Because I know there are many people, many families who may be considering transitioning from, a city or a built-up town area, and they're wondering, as we all do, how is this going to be possible? How am I going to, provide for our families? What are we going to do? Well, what we learned is that truly, there are times, not even that times, but it's all about trusting in God, as you mentioned before. You're not doing it in your own strength, but you're doing it because God said, do this. That's how we took it anyhow, knowing that when God promises or when he commands something, there's always a promise attached to every command that he will provide in this instance. And so this is just a quote from Review and Herald, September 27, 1906. It says that diligent work is now called for. In this crisis, no half-hearted efforts will prove successful. In all our city work, we are to hunt for souls. Wise plans are to be laid in order that such work may be done to the best possible advantage. And then she goes on to say, more and more, as wickedness increases in the great cities, we shall have to work them from outpost centers. This is one of the reasons why God is leading a people out of the cities into a country aspect, to become an outpost center. It's not just to, escape the crisis or to, for security.
Be a refuge for others too.
Yeah, but it's actually to work the cities, but not being or living in the cities, so you don't get trapped by what goes on there. So to work them from outpost centers, this is the way Enoch labored in the days before the flood. So we see a direct parallel there between what Enoch did before that great crisis in his generation and what God is calling us today to become as well. So that was just a synopsis of our journey. We hope you were blessed by that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. One of the things that seemed to come through to me, at least anyway, was the fact that it seems that it's almost I can liken your experience to pregnancy. It seems that you were tasked with the, addressing things that you need to address with yourselves, and as you invited people to your home field, that things happened and you didn't realize what was going on, and then as God is bringing these things to you, God is telling you, right, now that you see what I'm doing, now you need to go and do some training. Now you need to go do this and then do that and set yourself up for the next phase of the labor, as it were. And now I can see where how the whole the intensity with the training over the lockdown has come from. It's not something that came overnight. It's not something that you were actually looking for. It's something that God has actually been building up over time, bit by bit, gradually, step by step. So it's very interesting and very encouraging, I think, to all of us, that the mission field starts at home with each of us, and God will broaden it the quicker we learn the lessons that we need to learn. Gerard and Shirley, I got a question here from someone asking, how long did it take from planting a seed to the time you can eat what was grown?
Well, in the polytunnel, 3 weeks.
Well, it depends what it is,
Yeah.
but it's much quicker in the polytunnel, to my surprise, than it is in the soil.
Yes, I mean, literally kale, black kale, we planted seeds and 3 weeks later we're eating it. So that's how fast that goes.
Not planted seeds, but seedlings.
All right, little seedlings. So probably about 4 weeks by the time you plant the seedlings. So we really go very fast in planting. Other things are a bit slow. It depends what the bin is.
Yeah, I hope that answers that person's question. Does anyone else have any questions they would like to address to either of our panelists, to our presenters? You can either type it in the chat box, or you can just raise your hand and open your mic and ask the question. So I've got a question here to Shirley. Where do you stay when you visit places several days, and how do you finance the projects, i.e. like buying the van that supports the distribution?
Okay, what we just did was, the Birmingham one was difficult because we really struggled to get accommodation for that. But in the end, without paying a lot of money, because obviously it was a big sporting event and all the hotels were charging double or triple the prices. So in the end, quite a lot of people stayed at the Lutterworth Church. They opened up the church and people just took their beds and sleeping bags and stayed there. Some of us managed to find friends we could stay with. I was one of the fortunate ones who had a friend I could stay with. But one of the reasons why Timothy bought the van, we bought the van, was so that Timothy could ferry people in, because Lutterworth Church was about an hour's driving to Birmingham. So he picked me up on the way as well. Yeah, we just bought the van ourselves from finances we've got. But
Timothy's an electrician, so he needs a van for work.
yeah, we kind of. Yeah, we got a better van for his work. He did have a van, but it was an old one. It didn't have a seat in it, just built on the stock. So yeah, the Lord's blessed us with various things, and we've managed to have a bit of money, so we've been able to buy the van. That was how we did that. Most of the time, we just tend to go for the day. You know, if we're going to Cardiff or we're going to Newport or even Bristol, we've done Bristol for you as well. And we just go for the day, and we just have to get up early and go, really. Bristol, I think, is about 3 hours. And we did some of these places, you know, with the lockdowns, there's been protests. They've been quite places to give out books. So they had protests in Bristol and Cardiff and Newport. I'm Swansea, so we've gone over there and given out books to the protesters. Timothy's been a few times to London, so the big protests have been in London, and there have been people, friends of ours who've been giving out controversies every time they had a protest in London as well. So, yeah, we're just, most of us are just earning money one way or another. We just find jobs or whatever, and people, we do get people who donate as well and buy books for us, and so forth. So the Lord provides, I guess, one way or the other.
Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to address to our panelists? Go ahead.
Jacquie and Winston, we know you well. I should imagine a lot of people would be curious as to how you survive without having a secular job. How do you pay your rent and all the other bills? Can you enlighten some of the people, please?
Yeah, very good question.
Initially it was hard. Initially it was really hard, but please.
No, it's you know, God had blessed us with, you know, some finances to help us to make that transition. But finances only last for a time period. And so, as Brother Trevor mentioned, you know, as God was revealing his plan for us step by step, he also revealed a way. And one of the things that we did do is set up a non-profit organization. And also diversify in terms of not only selling books, but also using what God was teaching us as a way to sustain the ministry and teaching others as well.
Yeah, so initially it was hard. As Win said, we, you know, once everything dried up, it was like, okay, now what, Lord? What do we do? The co-portering work is there, but it wasn't like bringing in lots of money, enough for us to live on. We were barely paying our rent, and to be honest, initially we were cold. We couldn't pay for the oil to go in the tank to keep ourselves warm initially. But you know, it was a transition. It was a journey, and we had to just persevere and look for ways and means to work from home. Sometimes, actually, in the initial stages, Winston did some freelance work. You know, whether it's for the church, you know, oftentimes it's for the church, in evangelism, creating posters and, you know, for events and so on. So looking for any, different ways to use his talents to work, to obtain, you know, some money,
some income. And so God taught us how to diversify as well. We didn't just rely upon any one stream of income. But you know, the blessing, I think, was actually allowing the mission work to sustain itself, which is of course God's blueprint as well. You know, not to become dependent upon donations, but to use what he's given us and to diversify, whether it's creating products to sell, which is a thing that, you know, the kids are a dab hand at doing now, and or, you know, whatever it may be, whatever it may be.
But we do appreciate, and we have been blessed by donations. We some faithful, beautiful people who the Lord has always seemed to send just at you know, the time when we most need it. And it has been an absolute, you know, blessing every time, and it's a source of encouragement when it's received, to think, wow, Lord, you knew, and we asked, and you've used this person or this ministry, including Ministry Helps, you know, to help us at a time of need. So God has really kept us.
So you're saying that because you said it was hard at first, now I'm guessing it's easier now, and if that is the case, then what's the correlation between faith and what God has told you should be doing to help generate the income? Because obviously there's something that you need to do, or some things that God has shown you so that you can be independent, but at the same time dependent on him. So what's the correlation between the faith and the works, as it were?
Very good question. So for me initially, well, I say for me, but in our
Yes.
experience,
It's
it
we've been
was-
together, but we've had different experiences though together. Yeah.
but it was definitely a severing from, when we are blessed with full-time employment, you know, unbeknown to us, we do put our trust in that we know what's coming at the end of the month. And there's nothing wrong with that. God blesses in many ways. But moving into full-time ministry work now, you don't have that cushion, that buffer zone. Okay, and so in terms of the character building aspect and developing more trust in us, God began to show us another way how he would sustain us. And so things, Jacquie just mentioned a few examples, but there are times that were very difficult, especially, not knowing, where the next stream of money was going to come from to pay
How are we
bills,
going
to
to
buy
fill the
food,
tank?
etc., etc. And being in a rural location, you can't just go down the road, to the local store. But, and so God always provided that was the thing. Even though in our minds, we like to have that comfort, that safety blanket, so to speak, God always provided. Sometimes he let things run out, literally
Yeah.
run out. But we didn't have to beg.
And then you had to really and then it taught us to economize. So it's when we had the least money, it's when God taught me to use money more faithfully, and to be more stringent in certain aspects, and to make sure that when we go shopping, that it's going to last for a certain set of amount of time. If things run out, they run out, and it helps you actually to become more creative as well. But interesting in terms of faith and works, initially we helped others to train. Then we were speaking in churches, and it was when we went to a camp meeting and we met a pastor who hadn't seen us for a few years. Because previously when we would go to places, they would say, well, where do we go to obtain what you're saying? We'd be like UG Pines, we go to Meat Ministries, we go to Wildwoods, we're making all this list. And one day it was like God was saying, well, what do you, what about you?
What's in your hand?
What's in your hand? And we were like, we don't have a center, Lord. We don't have a place. We're in rented accommodation. We're praying for our own place. How do we do that? And he says, use what you have in your hand. That's exactly what God said. So when we went to this camp meeting and the pastor said, my wife's not well, if you guys can take her for a few weeks, I'll be very grateful. And we were like, no, we just teach and train right now, and we speak in churches. Would you like us to speak in your church?
Yeah.
And I want her to come to your house for 3 weeks. We're like, number one, come to our house. Number two, for 3 weeks. But that's how it began. There's a picture of her actually in the slides. That's how it began, that she was our very first official health guest. And then she went away and brought her son, and then he went away, and then her friend came. And then we started getting individuals through word of mouth. And initially it was one by one, and then it was 2 by 2, and then it was whole families, and then it was several families, and it's just, God has just been awesome.
That's amazing. During the week, I can't remember if it was early this week or last week, we were doing a study with the boys on Lazarus, and it said that Jesus had to stay away from Lazarus so that he could die, because in Jesus' presence he could not die. And then this morning I was reading Mark chapter 4, where it was talking about the journey across the lake, and how when the tempest came, the disciples and those in the ships around them were in panic, because they didn't know what to do, and they were focused on themselves and working and trying to save themselves. And then they looked around, they couldn't see Jesus, and then when the lightning pierced the darkness and they saw Jesus, he was at peace, sleeping safely, sound asleep. And then they called to him to save them, and then he woke up and he saved them. But it was interesting that they didn't seem to understand the power of being in Jesus' presence. So it doesn't seem to be that they understood that power or the benefit of the power that they had access to until Pentecost. And then after Pentecost, they seem to be fearless. Nothing fazed them. And I'm just wondering if you guys are still pushing weights to get to that stage of fearlessness where there is no fear about the finances, because it seems that faith and finance is a big, significant factor for all of us who are planning to make that move to the country or who are actually in the country. I don't know if either yourselves or Shirley and Gerard would like to speak to that and any experiences that you've had of that.
In our situation, we actually had a health food shop for I think it was 24 years, so it might be a little bit longer, I don't remember that one, but we had a health food shop for many years down in Portsmouth. And so we were, quite involved with the health industry too, and we, learned a lot about health and how to treat people with natural remedies and advise them and do demonstrations and health talks and those kind of stuff. But God really blessed with the finances as well. We did very well in the health food shop, and that enabled us to be able to buy our first country property and this one as well. Because God just blessed us so much, really. It's quite interesting because obviously we went over on Sabbath, and people said to us, "You'll never survive if you don't have on Sabbath. That's going to be your busiest day." But the Lord's blessed. I mean, so many times we'd be open on a Sunday, and people would come, especially on a Sunday, and they'd say to us, "Oh, we came yesterday, we weren't open, so we've come back today." And so the Lord really blessed, and so we did very well in the shop, and that enabled us to buy our country property. And we're getting a bit older now, so we can retire here. Our son obviously works, he's an electrician, but again, God is blessing him. He's getting plenty of work and doing pretty well. And so, I think if you're faithful, God does bless. It's just the thing. We've got to put God first always, and when we do that,
I think there's a different mentality to being self-employed people. And when you're self-employed, you don't know how much you're going to earn. But for us, I earned a lot more being self-employed, a lot more being self-employed than I did when I was employed. Although I worked as hard in both situations. And God did some quite amazing things. When I first started off, I'll give you one experience. When I first started off with my health food shop, we rented it, which is normal. And then our landlord got into financial trouble, and he gave the freehold of the shop to someone he owed a lot of money to. And this man didn't actually want the freehold, he wanted money. So he came to me and said, I want to sell you the shop, which is quite unusual to own the freehold of a shop. And he gave a price. And now I had a mortgage on a house we were living in, so I said, I can't afford it because, I've only just got this mortgage. I don't want two mortgages. Anyway, he just insisted that I buy it over months and months. And eventually I said, well, I'll check out. I'll talk to my surveyor and find out what the price was. So I talked to my surveyor, and he says, oh, the prices have gone right down. They're about half the price that you're being quoted for. So I went back to the landlord and I told him that. I thought he won't be interested in selling it anymore because it's half the price he was, that he had been given to him for. Anyway, so a few weeks later he came back and said, I've checked it out with my surveyor and it's correct what you're saying, but I still want to sell it to you. And in my heart I thought, oh no, I just don't want another mortgage. But that was God. But you know, I gave in, and I got that second mortgage, and we paid it off within 3.5 years because the shop was doing better and better, and that saving has saved us paying rent every month. And I mean, if I can mention a figure, we probably saved about 200,000 from that transaction, which was all of God, and I was unwilling to do it at the time. So that's how we got a lot of the money to buy.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
You know, and you know, it was God's providence that brought that about.
Wow, talking about faith and works, then so wonderful to hear your story, you know, and how amazing. I mean, the Lord has been kind of giving us the impetus that, yeah, we need to have our own place, and that has always been our desire. But we've never seen how that was going to happen. But lately, you're talking about the fearlessness. We're just like looking at properties and going to view them with no money in our hand or in our pocket or anywhere else. We're just going to view them and talking to the people that own it and talking to the individuals who show us around, and just getting an idea about what's around, what to look for, and so on. So we know God is doing something. We just don't know how it's good. And we want him to do what we think he wants to do, but we just don't know how it's going to happen. But that doesn't stop us from arranging to view properties left, right, and center. And when we turn up, these people look at us like, you're wasting time. and yeah, maybe someone could say that we are, but we just don't know what God is about to do. So you can say that's quite fearless, and some people may look and say that's quite foolish. You don't have money, what are you going to view a property for? But we've come across so many situations where God has simply opened up doors, just like he did for Brother Gerard and Sister Shirley. And so we just have to trust him and go forward in his confidence, you know, as he leads.
It's amazing. It's very amazing. Yes, go ahead.
Jacquie and Winston, isn't there an advantage in actually renting the property? And we're so close to the end of time, and we own our property like Gerard and Shirley do. And if we don't get the timing right when we should sell it and put the money into the Lord's work, then we have to walk away from quite an expensive property. You can walk away from a rented property and not have any recriminations. I think it's an advantage.
Yeah, that's definitely, you know, a positive in renting, because we did own a property, but we sold that into
mission.
What God had called us to do. You know, that's just how it worked out. You know, so.
But at the same time, what about when we can't pay our rent, when we can't buy and sell, and you rent, and the guy, you know, the landlord's like, well, you need to leave. Okay, then we have to just trust God.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it was difficult to let go initially. You know, we mentioned at the beginning of this journey when things were hard. And I think that was something that God was, through experiences, teaching us how to let go, to, you know, of fear, basically. That truly, you know, he does provide, even though we may not, even though we may have the 000 in our account, God is with us. His guidance. I think that's an important aspect of all of this. You know, that's we're not here, you know, just for the sake of, you know, we didn't wake up one day and say how to, you know, do mission work. We have just been following Providence's guidance and leading.
But then Uncle Jack is right. Then, because sometimes I plant things in pots, like I have these flowers. I'm like, I'm not putting them in the ground. We might be moving. I'm going to put them in a pot so we can take it with us.
Yeah.
So this mindset has to change, because what if, you know, what if it's God's plan that...
No, you don't But
we can just,
sold to
yeah,
in I will do the rest. So it could well be, you know,
yeah,
could well be Uncle Jack that this is God's plan.
Yeah.
You know?
Now, we have a problem. Remember, it says you won't be able to buy or sell. So that means if we get it wrong, we can't sell our property, and we've missed out on putting the money into the Lord's work. Then we're on a pension from the government, and they will stop that pension. Then we've got no income. And so there's all sorts of ins and outs of living in the last days. And a lot of people have moved into the country and they've got their funny tunnels and everything else to feed themselves. But again, Mrs. White tells us, be careful that you don't hoard up for yourself, i.e. looking after self. And I'm not saying you are, or Gerard and Shirley are, but be careful we're not looking after self at the expense of looking after others.
yeah.
I was going to say, in response to what you just said, Jack, we feel very convicted that we're preparing this place for others, not just ourselves, because, the Lord has blessed us here with a reasonable sized house, quite a bit of land, and there's going to be, as Timothy mentioned, there's going to be people, the 11th hour workers who will come in and accept the truth just before it's all finished. They won't have time to buy a country property because they'll come in just at the last minute before probation closes. And so I think God is going to bring people to us then, and He's going to expect us to open up our doors and share our home with them, our food with them, and so we feel, and okay, eventually we know we're probably going to have to flee from this place, but if we can help other people by bringing them in, and even now, people come and teach them country living, you can teach them what you're learning. It's not just for your own benefit what you do, we feel, it's for helping other people, you're all there to minister to others. So that's the way I look at it. And of course, like you said, Jacquie, we own this place, we've been able to buy it outright, we don't have a and the only issue at the moment is the tax you have to pay, but there is talk here in Wales about the fact that they'll charge you any tax if you've got no income. So that might be where the Lord will solve that problem. Because when we can't buy ourselves, we won't have any income, obviously. But we're trying to make ourselves really self-sufficient here so that we can be useful to help others. So we have wood burning stoves, for example. We've got a lot of wood on the property. We can heat the place, we can heat the water. We've got some solar panels, we can even have a bit of electricity. And we're growing our own fruits. We're trying to do everything we can so we can really be a benefit to not just ourselves but to others. So that's kind of what the Lord's put on our hearts. And it's quite interesting. Sylvia actually preached at Bristol this morning, and she came up with a quote which I hadn't actually come across before, where Sister White tells us to do that, prepare for those people who are going to come in at the last minute. Oh, Shazee was it? But anyway, it was a good quote that Sylvia came up with. I think it was from Elder Shazee, because he talks about that Elder that. But it kind of confirmed what we were thinking, being convicted that we should be doing.
Can I just make something clear that after there's going to be a close of probation. After the close of probation, we will have to flee, and we will be dependent on God to feed us. Before the close of probation, we're going to have that last great test for the people of God, which is when we won't be able to buy and sell. During that time, the angels are not, we're not promised that the angels are going to feed us. During that time, we're told to be in the countryside and grow our own provisions. If we are renting a house, we won't be able to do that. So, and I think that is the most critical time in Earth's history for Adventists. Are we going to be able to live through that last great test when we can't buy and sell? But it's before the close of probation. If we pass that test, we get to the close of probation,
you know, I think God will provide, you know, for people, you know, if we haven't got the resources to be able to buy a country property, I think God will provide, you know, we've got to trust that He will, like you were saying, Jacquie. You know, we shouldn't give up and think, oh, well, you know, but we just got to keep stepping forward in faith that He will provide in some way. I mean, obviously you're getting health guests. Somehow, maybe you'll earn lots of money through that, and will be able to provide you to buy a country property. You know, you can make it cheaper, like you did with the shop. There's all sorts of things you can do.
Yeah, there are other options. It's just a time to go.
Maybe we need to talk to you personally, but you know, even desire for a bigger place at this time, it's really about the work. You know, because we're having to either have to wait, ask people to wait, or turn people away, or try to find someone else to take care of those that we cannot, you know, we cannot help at any given time. And so the prayer was, Lord, maybe now it's time for a bigger place. We prayed for that when we were in a 3-bedroom house for 7 years where we operated from, and then he doubled that, and now it's like, okay, Lord, but now we are bursting at the seams, and we have workers who we've trained who want to also come and get the practical knowledge so that they can set up as well. You know, we've got a young family now in Burundi, and you know, another a young lady going to Kenya, and you know, they need to come and get the practical skills as well. So even the desire for a bigger place, somewhere of our own, was so that we can really do this on a larger, not a huge scale. We don't, because the idea is to have little places all over the place, but somewhere where we can facilitate the needs of those who are not well, and the needs of those who want to learn, and also our youth. You know, they love coming out to places like this to experience what it's like, and to also experience God in a way that really reaches very deep, and it yields the beautiful results. They're just
it's literally life transforming, isn't it? Young and old come out here.
Yeah, so
that sounds really nice. Really nice.
I've got a question coming through from YouTube asking, are any of these ministries employing people in the USA? I'm not sure. That's how the question's been posed. So I guess it's asking if any of you guys are employing anyone in the USA for any of your support work, I guess.
no, we don't have any. We don't employ anyone really. Just voluntary work, so to speak, and also those who have trained. Again, it's about voluntary work. We have a sister with us who, again, is with us on a voluntary basis. She herself, her life was touched by the work and by God, and she just wanted to dedicate her life to His work and purpose. So, it's really on a voluntary basis. We don't have the means to really employ anybody at this time. But if they wanted to come and volunteer, our door is wide open.
I've got a question. Going back to the mission field, from the time that you guys have been in the countryside and the mission field, how have you found the integration of what you're doing with the local church, or them integrating you into their activities, or the other way around? Whichever way it goes, both ways. I'm sure it's a two-way, should be a two-way relationship. So how have you found it, and what advice would you give to us? What advice from your experiences would you share going forward to ensure that that is as bountiful a relationship as possible, or as best it could be as possible? I don't know how to phrase it.
No, we get
it.
Yeah, very good question. Very good question. Generally speaking, some churches embrace what we're doing, others don't understand it, you know. So there is that mix as well, because you mentioned, Jacquie, earlier about being invited to speak in churches. You know, that invitation doesn't necessarily always come from the pastor. It comes, it comes from people, lay people within the churches, either health departments or other, as said, departments. So God finds a way, because that's something that we are passionate about in terms of, you know, the medical missionary work is the right arm of the gospel, and the church, the two aspects, the gospel work and the health work, have to be combined, you know, because at the end of the day, it's all about winning souls for Christ.
Amen.
And where do we send them to, you know, once people come inquiring and seek healing, spiritual healing as well?
Yeah, I think when we first moved to Dumfries and Galloway, when we looked for a church, there was no churches. We didn't investigate if there were going to be any churches. We just moved, and then it's like, oh, okay, no churches. And initially, we thought that part of God's remit was for us to do church planting, because we had done church planting immediately before coming. But then God was like, no, you're not going to poison anybody right now. You guys need help yourselves. So that was not part of his plan. But what we did institute was a church in our home. So we had home, and then periodically we'll travel to Carlisle, we'll travel to Edinburgh, we'll travel to Glasgow, we'll travel to Irvine, you know. So we would alternate it, 1 week home, 1 week away, 1 week home, 1 week away. And like Winston said, some churches embraced us and were able to share and do some outreach with some of those churches, and others looked at us with suspicion. And so sometimes the lay people, like for example, if they were programmed to speak, they would invite us to speak in their stead. So that's how it worked. And even in, you know, in one of the churches, we started attending more faithfully, because we thought it's in a prime position, it's in the middle of the city, we could do so much, but they wouldn't let us, and that was so sad. And actually, it eventually, you know, because one of the things was, I'm not leaving. We're going to stay here. This is my father's house, kind of thing. But in the end, it was starting to take its toll on the children, and so on. So we had to consider that sometimes you have to just let that be. There are people that are not going to understand God's plan in that, from your point of view.
Yeah, and God is out to reach everybody. You know, even those who may initially reject this message. I remember we went to speak at a church, and you know, we spoke on health, and the congregation hated the message. This is what they told us after. In fact, it was a couple years after. But you know, those 2 years, because that seed was planted, that church became known as the Health Reform Church. You know, so that initial rejection was actually, you know, the seed, and God watered it, and many people were blessed. In fact, some of them have gone back to their you know, place of birth to do this work, to spread the health message as well in their congregations back home. And so you never know how God works. What we do know is that, you know, for us not to become dejected or feel rejected, you know, but to know that, you know, God wants to reach all minds.
And follow God's plan regardless of the reception that you receive. And because people have ideas and perceptions of what you're supposed to be. But, you know, just reveal Christ, and let them, you know, choose to receive you or not. So, yeah, and the mission as well. I don't know what...
I have to say, we're pretty fortunate that the local church here in Aberystwyth is quite supportive of us, really. I mean, they're quite happy in what we're doing. We tend to, like, we've just come back from Birmingham this weekend, so I gave them a report of how it all gone, and they're happy to hear that. And when we do Aberystwyth, they generally come out with us, quite a few of them. They don't usually come further afield because I guess it's difficult for them to do that. But we've been, you know, involved, like Kamal, we go and do some work with them. When they do outreach, we go and give out books with them as well. And maybe some of the other churches we will as well. We just have to see how it all works out. But generally speaking, we're finding that a lot of people are willing to do it, can't they? I mean, sometimes they don't come out, you know. It was difficult immediately after COVID. I think a lot of people just thought, oh, we shouldn't be going out because, you know, sort of restrictions still and mask wearing and everything. But we just went out because we thought, you know, we've got to do the work. Who knows how long we've got, you know. So that's been our experience. But by and large, I think, you know, we have been able to work with the local church.
The members.
Yeah, with the members, yeah. So it's
Members are mostly willing, and a question that just come about the ministry's experience in a referral system from any of the churches or conferences where they are.
Like, sure.
But
Referral system. Sure.
But in terms of the members, you know, it's such a blessing when we. I was told by a young man, it's not that young actually, but this gentleman that they wanted us to do SEC camp meeting. Initially, I was like, okay, well done. Thank you for the invitation. Once you have gotten the all clear, let us know. And he's like, no. Honestly, it's going to work out. I'm like, okay, if it's God's plan, then it'll be according to his will. So he, because he had experienced something and his mother had experienced, restoration from the things that she was suffering, he was determined, and he did our training during the pandemic. He was determined that, you know, he was going to make a referral, and we didn't think it would work, but God opened the way, and the president called us, which is always such a blessing when you actually get a call from someone who's not sure about you, rather than dismissing you, but calling or visiting to see, okay, who are you? What do you do? And what are you about? What are you teaching? And those are some of the questions that we were asked, and we're able to honestly share with him. And at the end of the conversation, it's like, see you at SEC camp meeting. And it was like, praise the Lord. That was so encouraging. So yeah, we have had quite a lot of referrals from, you know, sometimes from pastor to pastor, but mostly from church member to church member, whether individually or in a group setting. I don't know if that's answered your question.
I think that's the gist I get from that question about referrals, whether the referrals are coming from the churches or the conferences. And it seems like you get more, initially the most of the referrals were coming from the members. And as God has continued to, as you've been faithful to God, God is now sort of moving it up the hierarchy, as it were. The request is coming from higher up in the organization, so to speak.
But it was very sad of a lady who, at the camp meeting, you know, she sat down, she listened to one of our talks, and then she sat down next to me at lunch, and she said, I'm very angry. She said, I'm so angry. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, what did I say? And she said, no, it's not what you said. If you people are here and you're doing all of this, but you're here too late. I was like, what do you mean? She says, we've had some dear people we've lost through this pandemic. Where were medical missionaries then? You know, why were you not in the churches? Why were you not being used to help us? And that really, really made me sad. And I had to just be silent and listen to her. And then I prayed with her and thought, wow, in fact, that, you know, that
was our busiest period.
That was our busiest period, but the churches, most of the churches didn't know. Yeah, so that's to pray about.
There's a lot to pray about. Well, we've come to the end of our time, and before we close in prayer, I'd like each of you, maybe if each of our presenters could share a closing thought with us and with the larger sphere of where this the content of this this evening's session will be posted, to something that would inspire future listeners and the current ones today in the right way? Because we've heard the testimony just now of question, where were you? Where have you been? And the question that comes to my mind is, where has this message been? It's not been anywhere but in the books, and Satan's done a good job in keeping it, suppressing it. So if you could share something to just encourage the rest of us to step up, as it were.
I must say, Sister White tells us that as readily as we have a place prepared for us in the heavenly mansion, God has a place for us to work here now. So I think, we've shared the way God has led us and what He's led us to do. And I think everybody just needs to pray and ask God what specifically He wants them to do, because He's got to work for everybody. And it isn't the same work, Some of us get involved with similar work to what we're doing, and Jacquie and Winston are doing, but it may be something completely different, because different hearts are reached in different ways. So I would just say, pray that God will show you the work He's got for you to do, because He's got to work for everybody.
Amen.
I think that there needs, there's only really a very small percentage of the Adventists in this country who have moved out of the country. There needs to be hundreds more. I think for me it started when we were still in the town city, and I started to get I didn't like living in the city. Every day I could, I went out into the countryside on my days off. And I got a liking for the countryside, love the countryside. And I think if you're an Adventist living in the city, that might be a good start. Get to love the countryside, and then follow God's providence.
Amen. Don't limit God. I think my words are taken from Desire of Ages, which was a quote that helped us a lot. It gave encouragement, especially in times of need. And in page 330, Desire of Ages, it says, "Our Heavenly Father has 1,000 ways to provide for us, of which we know nothing. Those who accept the one principle of making the service and honor of God supreme will find perplexities vanish and a plain path before their feet." This is God's promise, His command. And I would just encourage each and every one of us who may be considering these things to go forward as quickly as possible.
Forward in every aspect that He calls you to, because in honesty, the journey began with homeschooling, and panned out and out and out. So it's all encompassing, and it involves the whole life. So you know what, whatever you know today, ask God to give you the strength to do it. So as we do what we know, He will continue to grow and grow us, and add to us, and by His grace lead us step by step into His desired places.
Before we close in prayer, Anthony's just asked the question to Gerard and Shirley. Which part of the country are you in?
We're in Wales.
Midwest Wales, near Lampeter.
Midwest Wales, near where, sorry?
Lampeter.
Lampeter. I hope that answers your question, Anthony. Thank you both for...
Thank you.
Good. Thank you both for sharing your experience of mission in the field and the countryside. We can see that from your experiences, God has really been working through both your families. God has is working you both the city and the countryside. So it's not just one area that you're focusing on, but the both groups, both sets of people in the country and the city. So it has been an encouraging time that we spent with you. So let's close in prayer and let's ask God to bless you both your families, and also to encourage us to step out in faith, because we're going to need to push some weight so that we can actually have the experience that we need to remain faithful to God when all earthly support has been cut off. So let's pray. Let's bow our heads and pray. Heavenly Father, we would like to thank you so much for the time that you've spent with us, that you have given, the experiences that you've given to both sets of presenters, their experiences, and what we can personally gain from what they've shared. We can see that you are willing to work with anyone that's willing to submit themselves and give themselves wholly to your service. I pray that what we've heard this evening will inspire us to step out and connect ourselves with you, to have a living connection with you, so that we will do what we're supposed to be doing, and to really relearn and rework our education, because we've learned to live in a certain way which really diminishes our faith and trust in you and what you say. I pray that you may be with everyone that's joined this meeting and those that are hearing the recording later, that you may work on all our hearts and sanctify us for your cause, that we may be willing to work and willing to surrender all to you, so that you can do a measureless work through us. In Jesus' name we pray. Bless both families and bless everyone attending and those listening. In Jesus' name we say, amen.
Amen.
So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Thank you to our presenters and for taking the time to share with us. The next time we meet will be on the 27th of July, and we'll be hearing the experience of a brother called Norman Clark, who will be sharing his experience of his journey to the country. So I look forward to seeing you all again in a few weeks from now on the 27th of July. May God be with you and God bless you.
That's surely the 27th of August.
That's exactly what I meant. Thank you so much for the correction. That's it.
God bless you.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you guys.
God bless everybody.